It is at 6:30. Jamie, may we please have a roll call?
Councilmember Harrop.
Here.
Councilmember Way.
Here.
Councilmember Hilmer.
Here.
Vice Mayor Chu.
Here.
And Mayor Morrison.
Here. And if you're able to, please stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, we have, let's see, we're going to start with the public comment. Does anybody have any comments to make that is not on the agenda tonight? We welcome any comments. All right, I see none. Okay, we'll move on. We have no presentation. Now we need approval of the consent calendar. Does any council members want anything pulled from the consent calendar? No, I see none. Or go out to the public. Would anyone from the public like something pulled from the consent calendar? James, you need to come on up. Would you come up to the mic and state your name?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I would request that number 4.6 be pulled for discussion.
All right, and that's adopt a resolution vacating a portion of the Walnut Avenue right-of-way adjacent to 10 Walnut Avenue. And James, what's your concern?
Would you like me to present that right now as opposed to at a later date or?
No, please do.
All right. My concern is to preserve the public parking in this area of Walnut and to be sure that the legal documents reflect the fact that the public parking will remain public. The right-of-way area to be vacated includes, I believe, based on the map in your staff report, public parking spaces. This is the only public parking available in the area, and therefore it's important to keep it and to avoid inadvertently privatizing a public resource. It's important to note that the statutory standard for vacating the right-of-way is not met with respect to the parking area because the statute requires no public use for the previous 5 years, but this parking area is in constant public use now and for decades in the past, to my personal knowledge. Retaining the public use of this parking was of great concern to the Planning Commission when it initially heard this matter. The draft Planning Commission minutes were not included in your packet, but just to give you a flavor of the concern in the comments after the hearing, Commissioner Tauber, parking should be maintained on the street. Commissioner Zeising, greater clarification about the parking should be added to the motion. Commissioner Sang, maintaining public parking would be a good thing. Chair Dignan, the parking spaces should be left in the public right-of-way and not in the new parcel. And then the Director of Public Works here is quoted, Public Works Director Skinner stated the new right-of-way line will be drawn behind the existing utility pole where people park. No public parking is being removed. Staff could include in the report to the council that those spaces in front of the lot are to remain public parking spaces. However, the council's proposed resolution does not reference the parking, although it does reference and exclude from the vacation the easement for the street light. I believe that both the public parking and the street light should be excluded from the vacating to ensure that the public parking remains public and is not vacated. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Staff, can we have an answer to James?
Can I ask a question, Madam Mayor?
Sure.
Well, I guess my question gets to that. Questions for staff. Is there, as the member of the public has stated, an inconsistency between the minutes, recommendations by the commissioners, and the proposal in the staff report with respect to the parking?
I have no reason to doubt the veracity of draft minutes. I have not seen them, but I assume what he represented is what was stated, and that is what the staff report states, that we are not going to lose public parking.
Can we verify that?
I do have a copy of the draft minutes
Yeah,
here.
No, I mean verify the
I
proposed.
can't enter into the record draft minutes. I'm not sure how Mr. Holmes is in possession of draft minutes. But
No, I'm just a question for the Public Works Director. Is the public parking going to remain?
So in the staff report for tonight's council agenda item, and I think it's the third paragraph on the second page, it talks about the planning commission process and that the Department of Public Works is concluding that the portion of the right-of-way in question is in excess and that the existing street parking fronting Mr. Haramis's property remains open to public use. So that's the Public Works determination, is that the parking public parking does not go away with this vacation.
Thank you very much.
Great. Okay, and Sally Ann, do you want to come up and
I came before you.
please state your name and
Sally
address?
Ann
and-
Wilson, 517 South Alicio, formerly, starting in 1970, 3 Walnut Avenue, Larkspur. So my neighbor at the time, we had very good relations, and he, as well as we, and others on Walnut, understand the need to keep that public parking space. Otherwise, nobody could ever come to anybody's house.
Great, and it looks like we're going to keep that. Thank you.
My concern, though, would
James.
be that it's not referenced anywhere in the legal documents. And as I think we all know, when it comes to real estate matters,
James, you need to up on your mic.
I'm
please.
sorry. My concern would be that the reservation is not referenced in the legal documents, and as we all know, with regard to real estate, one needs to have it spelled out. And additionally, we have the street light is excluded. So what we have here legally is one item is excluded from the vacation, but the other item is not. So we have a situation where there has been disparate treatment of the two different items, and under standard legal doctrines, that would lead to the conclusion that a different intent was intended. So my concern would be that if it's not in the resolution, then it would not be clear that the public parking is to remain public.
Okay, thank you, James. Cindy, let me get back to James, okay? So just a moment, please. Julian, do you want to answer?
Yeah, so the legal document that will get recorded at the county to conclude this process is a quick claim of the city's right-of-way. That area is described by a meets and bounds and a map that accompanies it that is signed by a licensed surveyor. The exhibit for that map and the description of that area is what determines the amount of area that we're quit claiming. What's in the resolution is kind of a summary of what that area is, but the legal document is the actual description of the boundary accompanied by the map. And I think some of the confusion is that the parking area is somewhat irregular shaped. The street is somewhat straight, and then the parking area behind does not have a very well-defined back to it. And so the city consciously drew the right-of-way line to exclude a retaining wall to make sure that that retaining wall is on the private property, but that the area that people actually park in is retained within the city right-of-way. And so technically, the back area of the parking spaces is going to be quitclaimed by the city, but it's beyond what is used by the public for parking, and it will leave there parking that's consistent with the rest of the off-street parking on Walnut as far as size and configuration.
Okay. And Dan Schwartz, do you think it needs to be in the resolution?
I do not. If the council would like to do that, my recommendation would be to put it in a whereas clause, that whereas it's the city council's desire that there be no loss of public parking on street with this action.
I'm okay with that. I don't see what harm that would be.
Yeah, I don't see any harm in doing that. It makes it more clear and explicit as to what the intent is, especially for future generations.
That's correct. All right, so, sir, you may, I think Cindy's ahead of you, and then,
Can I ask a follow-up question to some of the things Mr. Holmes brought up?
Absolutely, you can.
He mentioned something about public use for 5 years. Can you clarify Can you clarify for me what that issue was about?
Yeah, so there are two ways to abandon city right-of-way. And one way, which is the way that this process has been following, is called a summary vacation, which does not require a public hearing. And there are a number of findings that need to be made in order to follow that process. And one of them is that you are abandoning city right-of-way that has not been used for a period of 5 years for the purpose to which it was dedicated to the city. There are some other criteria too, such as no city funds must have been used to maintain that area. And we're finding, our finding for this was that the back area of those parking spaces has not been used for public use. It's basically the top of a retaining wall.
Okay. Great. Anything else from the council? All right.
Cindy
Please state your-
Winter. I usually don't speak on these topics, but a few days ago, James told me about 10 Walnut. And I've lived in Larkspur since 1983, and I've never been up there, so I took a walk. And I immediately saw those 2 parking spaces, and I can understand why they're important to the people who live up there. But I have a long history with legal documents, and it is very clear to me and important to me that they be lucid, that they are comprehensive, that they can be readily understood by the public. Because once these documents are finalized, they're going to be on file forever. And maybe 10, 20, 30 years from now, somebody will be looking at them, and we don't want that person to have to go through all the hullabaloo and confusion that we're going through right now. It should be an easy process. So my suggestion for the resolution was, I think it's preferable to put the part about the parking in the resolution along with the light pole. But if for some reason you don't want to do that, I would create a side letter and have a lot of people sign off on it and attach it to that resolution as Exhibit B. But I think it has to be in one neat package for that person in the distant future to understand. That's my concern. Thank
Great,
you.
thank you. Appreciate that, Cindy. Sir, would you like to say something? Please state your name and address, please.
So my name is Anton Haramis. 10 Walnut is my residence. And I would like to say that the parking issue has been somewhat misconstrued here this evening, but be that as it may, let me see if I can lay all this out. So the reason for all of the work we're doing here is because by some, who knows what set of occurrences, the street right-of-way stretches into my home such that a full third of my home is in the street right-of-way. So we are trying to rectify a situation, and by the way, the home's been there for 100+ years. I myself have been there for almost 22 years. Went to Redwood High School, played in the park across the street. So I am as much a resident here as anyone else, and I appreciate what we're calling the parking as well. And until my friend here brought it up, there was, in fact, in the Planning Commission, no discussion about parking. After he brought it up, most commissioners said, well, yeah, parking seems okay. There was one commissioner that said, well, wait a minute. There was never the intent of having a parking spot there. In fact, what is creating the parking spot is a very substandard retaining wall. I'm not sure if Public Works has looked at that retaining wall. It looks like it was put in by whoever lived in the house, my predecessor. And so I wonder out loud, if we're going to make this an official parking spot, who wants to be responsible for that? And should we ask the city to perhaps put in a proper retaining wall, prior to the handoff here? So I'm a little concerned about, what we're really talking about. Certainly, it's not my intention to take away any parking. I'm grateful that Sally Ann is here because she is just downhill of Walnut from me, and just because of the way the houses are arranged, the next house is around the corner. They don't really use any of that parking. In fact, it's my house that uses that parking. The two cars that are parked there are almost exclusively belong to my house. So, while I appreciate the discussion, it has been mischaracterized as a great benefit to the city of Larkspur. In fact, I'm the guy who uses those spots. And what, again, I wasn't prepared for this discussion, and so I don't have meeting minutes and such in front of me, but I just wonder out loud, what the legal implications are of requiring that parking and then the retaining wall that holds it up. And if we should be having that discussion, does the city want to take over, or, take on the burden of a brand-new retaining wall to maintain that parking into the 20, 30, 50-year future that everyone seems to be concerned about?
Absolutely.
It sounds like you don't want to go through with the deal.
No, I want to go through with the deal.
It sure sounds like you don't want to go through with the deal.
Not so, sir. I'm just not sure what the implications are of, stating clearly, that this is a parking spot when it was never originally called out as a parking spot. In other words, one of the planners, who was much more familiar with the law around this, said, look, according to the, maybe Julian can help me with this a little bit, but according to the Highway Act that governs these things, this was never called out as parking, and so why should we call it out as parking now? That was the gist of what he said. But no, I certainly want to go forward. My house really is in the public right of way, and it's a problem that needs to be resolved. So, I'm not going to not go forward, but it just seems like something that wants to be clear for the record.
I just don't understand what it is you're asking us to do differently.
I'm not sure what's being asked of you to consider by the gentleman here. I mean, in other words, I'm not sure what's on the table. So I'm not asking you to do anything
The
different.
Public Works Director clarified that the use outside of the parcel that's the subject of the transaction is used for public parking. There was a request that we put a whereas in that clarified that. I don't know what it is you're asking us to do differently than the deal.
I like the deal. I don't understand what the whereas clause means.
It just clarifies what the Public Works Director already stated, which is that the existing use for the area adjacent to your parcel that is the subject of the transaction is public parking.
And it's not privately owned.
So the fact that you use it doesn't change the fact that it's public parking.
Great, okay.
So there's nothing about any of this that you're asking be changed.
I don't believe so.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Thanks for clearing that up, Dan. Any other questions for Dan Schwartz or Julian? Okay, so Dan, if we're going to add the whereas, do we pull it from the?
No, I can do this if you don't mind doing it at the dais, Madam Mayor.
I would appreciate you doing that.
I would recommend a fifth whereas be inserted, so an insertion between the current fourth and fifth one listed in the printed document that would read, whereas it is the City Council's preference and intention that existing designated on-street parking spaces be preserved.
Great. All right, thank you for clarifying that.
I'll make sure the city clerk has that. So if you want to just in someone's motion, say as amended as stated by the city manager, I think you'll be okay.
Okay, so I'm going to close the public and bring it back to the council. May I please have a motion with what Dan just suggested for the consent calendar?
I move to approve Resolution 1319 as amended by the city manager.
I'd like to second that.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So we passed the consent calendar with the.
No,
all right,
that's
so
just-
now we-
that's just that
now
item.
we
So
need
now
go
we need
back
to
the
approve this consent
calendar. And
Yes,
may
ma'am.
I have a motion for the consent calendar?
So move the balance of the consent calendar.
Second.
Yeah, that's fine. And just, I will support that motion, but particularly appreciate the inclusion of item 4.4, support of HR 530, accelerating wireless broadband development by empowering local communities, Act of 2019. I think that's an important statement for us to be making as a community, and I'm glad that we are approving that as part of our consent calendar.
Me
this
too, I was
evening.
going to mention that. And I also want to thank the two planning commissioners and the two council members for the general plan update, housing element. Excellent job. Well done. So with that, are we all in favor of approve the consent calendar?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, it's done. Thank you very much. And we'll move on to the city manager or report, please.
I'm going to be very brief for you, Madam Mayor, because while there are several things to report from the recent Central Marin Fire Authority Board meeting, I think the council members would probably like to do that. I'll help if need be. But I do want to let the council and the community know, last night the Corte Madera Town Council passed its ordinance for governing and regulating flavored tobacco sales, and we will be bringing you that ordinance in the exact same form next meeting, Jamie, for first reading? Next meeting for first reading. Our goal was to make sure that whatever Corte Madera passed, we passed the same one to make sure that the regulations are applied the same way by Central Marin Police Authority and our staffs. So you'll be seeing that at your upcoming meeting.
Great, look forward to that. Anything else? Dan?
I think the city clerk has a concern. I'm not sure. Okay, never mind. All right, so we're good. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Sure.
How's the city hanging in with all the storms? I did see 101, and not us, but 101 was closed, a little bit of section there because of a mudslide. I'm just hoping we're not having any slides.
We haven't had any significant slides. Where we did the repair at Villa Cumbre, we had a little minor reslide in that location, but it wasn't anything that was unexpected. And we had our usual, I would say, loss of trees with the combination of wet ground and high winds, and then our localized flooding at some of our lower lying streets that are a combination of rain and tidal.
Well, nice job. I'm sure you've been kept up, Julian, with all the storms. Your staff is quite busy. All right, I'll bring it back to the council. Do we have any council members' reports? Larry?
I'll let the chair of the Central Marin Fire Authority report out on our last meeting.
Do you have anything else you're going to say?
No.
Oh, then I'll do that one. Oh, all right. Well, I
Go
guess
ahead.
I better start. So the Central Marin Fire Board, or we're not a board.
Council.
Council, excuse me, met last week and following the police council, and we received the final beginning of the final documents, actually all the final documents from CalPERS, and they were all approved by the board members and also the Battalion Chiefs Association and by the Firefighter Union Association, and they were apparently turned over the next day to CalPERS, and now we're in this 20-day window in which there could be sort of any last-minute changes by the firefighters union if they want, but we don't anticipate any of that. So we're having a special meeting of the Fire Council on the 21st to finalize everything, and we're done.
It's exciting.
Is that right? You want to add anything?
That's right. We will be not just an authority in name, we will be fully functional employees in the authority in April.
We need to have a celebration.
Yeah, and I think I want to publicly recognize the hard work that both city managers have done. Between Dan and Todd, work with not only Sacramento, but with the unions, and really putting the extra in there about the financial relationships that we've had to disentangle with each other. I think they did a tremendous job. It's taken a long time to get Sacramento to sign off on this, but not because. With the persistency of both of our city managers, I think it was able to be done. So, thank you for that.
Good news.
Anything else, Larry, that I missed on that?
No, you
Okay.
covered everything on fire.
My second, about fire, just to remind everybody about the FireWise workshop that's this Friday. That was announced. And Todd Lanto, who we have now employed part-time with the Central Marin Fire, will be leading this. And I recommend it for everybody who's interested. It's in Novato on Friday. And lastly, the neighborhood response groups are doing their spring drill on Sunday. And there'll be a follow-up meeting for them on Tuesday. That's all I have.
Super, thank you. Anyone else? Give a report? Kevin?
Just briefly, I just want to report on, very briefly, on the progress that we're making with the Larkspur Library and Community Center Foundation, which is making good progress. We've been meeting on a fairly regular basis. We've been expanding some of the scope of the engagement that we've had within our community on that. I attended a meeting on the 28th, at the end of February, and I just want to report out that we are continuing to meet as a working group. The group will be essentially developing what we're calling a case statement that will articulate kind of the vision that we want to put out into the community as a way of raising funds. And we're in the process of developing possible individuals who might be willing to contribute to the process.
Good.
So
Great. Hope that list is long. Thanks, Kevin.
it's growing.
I just want to report on, I am chairing the Marin Teen Girl Conference this year. It is on March the 31st, and we have the ambassadors, they're the teenagers, and we have an ambassador from every single high school and 8th grade from Marin County. So it's just an incredible, wonderful group. They help put this conference together. We have 2 keynote speakers, and we have over 18 workshops from professional women who just want to share their experience and motivate these young ladies. So we're very excited. It happens March the 31st from 9 to 3:30 at the Embassy Suites, and we're hoping to have at least 300 young teens attend this conference. So we're very excited about that. With that, I'm done. And Larry, do you want to say something?
Yeah, before I handed it over, I forgot we also had a police council meeting before that, and actually you're absent for that.
I was not there, that's correct.
You know, primarily, Chief went through the audit with us. Fundamentally, you know, all the cities are pretty strong, so they're the ones that are contributing to the JPA, but I think like any other public agency, you know, we do need to review our long-term liabilities associated with post-employment benefits. So that'll be something that the chief will be bringing back to us. On the strategic plan side, if I look at the short and the medium-term goals, one of our biggest challenges, as I've reported out before, is hiring and retention of police officers in this area. So they've come up with some ideas there, and we'll continue to pursue those, both in terms of attracting new people as well as giving more opportunities to people who are already employed by us.
Great.
So do you remember anything else we had?
No, that was right.
Okay.
All right. Great, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your reports. With that, we're going to go to public hearing, which we have none. No business items. So with that, kind of a motion to adjourn this council meeting. So moved. Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. No one opposes. All right. Thank you very much for coming.